The whistle blew for the fourth time in 10 minutes, and I watched my girls' faces fall as another penalty was called against us. The referee's eyes met mine across the field, and in that moment, I knew this wasn't about soccer anymore. This was about something much deeper, something that had been haunting me my entire life. The feeling that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I deserved to be there, someone would always find a way to remind me that I didn't belong. Which country are you listening from? Tell us in the comments below. My name is Maya Johnson, and for the past 5 years, I've been coaching youth soccer in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. At 32, I thought I'd found my calling, watching young girls discover their strength, their voices, their power through sport. My team, the Atlanta Lightning, was made up of brilliant, determined girls aged 12 to 14, representing every corner of our diverse community. They were my pride, my joy, and honestly, my hope for a better future. Growing up in East Atlanta, I learned early that sports could be an equalizer. When I stepped onto a soccer field at age 7, wearing hand-me-down cleats that were 2 sizes too big, I discovered something magical. On that patch of grass, talent mattered more than zip codes. Or at least that's what I believed then. I'd built this program from the ground up after playing Division I soccer at Georgia State University and briefly going pro with the Atlanta Beat before they folded. When a knee injury ended my playing career at 24, I channeled that same competitive fire into coaching. These weren't just my players, they were my daughters in every way that mattered, my legacy, my chance to give back to girls who reminded me so much of myself at their age. The Lightning practiced at Riverside Community Park, a modest facility in a working-class neighborhood where the grass was patchy and the goals needed repainting every season. But what we lacked in resources we made up for in heart. I used my own money for equipment when the league budget fell short. I drove players to practice when their parents couldn't leave work. I organized fundraisers at local churches and community centers, selling plates of my grandmother's famous mac and cheese to pay for tournament fees. The girls had worked tirelessly all season. We practiced 3 times a week, rain or shine, on that imperfect field that somehow felt more like home than any pristine facility we'd ever visited. I watched Destiny Williams, whose single mother worked 2 jobs just to keep them afloat, transforming from a shy kid who barely spoke above a whisper into a fierce midfielder who controlled the pace of every game. I saw Aaliyah Brooks, who struggled with anxiety so severe that she'd once hidden in the bathroom during a math test, become a defender who never backed down from any challenge. And there was Emma Rodriguez, whose parents had immigrated from Honduras when she was 5, scoring goals that made the whole team believe in magic. Our record was 12-1, and we'd beaten teams with twice our budget and resources. Teams from Buckhead with their professional trainers and custom gear. Teams from Johns Creek with their perfectly manicured fields and parents who treated youth soccer like a business investment. We'd earned our place in the Georgia Youth Soccer League Championship through pure grit and determination. But as we lined up for the biggest game of these girls' young lives, warming up on the pristine artificial turf of North Fulton Soccer Complex, I had no idea we'd be fighting more than just the opposing team. I had no idea that all my years of preparation, all my certifications and coaching clinics, all my efforts to be beyond reproach, wouldn't matter when it came down to the moment that would define our season. The morning of the championship game, I'd arrived at the complex 2 hours early. I wanted everything perfect for my girls. I arranged the coolers with ice and sports drinks, organized the first aid kit, and laid out the warm-up cones in precise patterns. I'd ironed each girl's jersey the night before, making sure every detail was flawless. This was our moment, and I was determined that nothing would go wrong. As the girls arrived with their families, I felt that familiar pre-game excitement mixed with nerves. Parents hugged their daughters, whispered words of encouragement, and took photos by the team banner we'd made together during a pizza party fundraiser. These families had become my extended family over the years. They'd supported me through my divorce, celebrated with me when I'd finally saved enough to buy my own house, and trusted me with their most precious gifts, their children. Coach Maya. Destiny called out, pointing to the stands as she bounced a ball on her knee. Look how many people came to watch us. I turned to see our small but mighty cheering section. Parents who'd taken time off work they couldn't afford to miss, grandparents with homemade signs written in glitter and colored markers, little siblings in Lightning jerseys that were hand-me-downs from older kids who'd aged out of the program. Mrs. Williams had brought her famous chocolate chip cookies. Mr. Brooks held a sign that read, "Defense wins championships," in support of his daughter. The Rodriguez family had organized a whole section of extended family members, all wearing yellow and blue. It filled my heart, but I also couldn't help but notice the stark contrast with the Westside Warriors side of the stadium. Their supporters occupied the premium seating area, Perfectly manicured parents in designer athletic wear that probably cost more than I made in a month, professional photography equipment capturing every moment, and a banner that must have cost more than our entire uniform budget. Their team warm-up gear was pristine, matching, and clearly expensive. Even their water bottles were branded with the team logo. The Warriors were the defending champions, a team from one of Atlanta's most affluent suburbs. Their coach, Brad Morrison, was a former college player who'd never had to worry about fundraising or begging for field time. Their parents were the type who hired personal trainers for their 12-year-olds and spent thousands on private coaching. This was their world and they expected to win. But I'd seen my girls play. I knew what they were capable of when they played with joy and freedom. We'd beaten teams just as good as the Warriors, and we'd done it by playing beautiful, creative soccer that came from the heart rather than expensive training sessions. The first thing I noticed was how the referee, Mr. Patterson, seemed to know the Warriors coach personally. They shook hands like old friends, laughing about something as our girls warmed up. Patterson was a middle-aged white man with graying hair and the kind of confidence that comes from never having your authority questioned. He'd been officiating youth soccer in Georgia for over 15 years, and his reputation was generally solid, though I'd heard whispers from other coaches about questionable calls in certain games. "Coach Morrison," Patterson called out jovially. "How's that new house in Alpharetta working out for you?" "Fantastic, thanks for asking," Morrison replied. "You'll have to come by for a barbecue sometime. Meet the wife." They continued their casual conversation while I gathered my team for our pregame talk. I tried to push down the uncomfortable feeling growing in my stomach. So what if they knew each other? That didn't necessarily mean anything. I'd officiated games where I knew the coaches too. Professionalism was about setting those relationships aside when the whistle blew. I knelt in the center of our team circle, looking at each of my girls individually. "Listen to me," I said, my voice steady and calm. "You've worked harder than any team I've ever coached. You've overcome challenges that would break most people. Today isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about proving to yourselves that dreams come true when you refuse to give up." "What if we're nervous?" asked Sarah Chin, our youngest player at just 12 years old. "Then you remember that being nervous means this matters to you," I replied. "And anything that matters is worth fighting for. You belong to this field. You've earned your place here. Now let's go show everyone what Lightning soccer looks like." The game started well enough. Within the first 5 minutes, we'd established our rhythm: quick passes, smart movement, the kind of fluid soccer that comes from girls who've played together for years and trust each other completely. Aaliyah won the ball in the defensive third and played it wide to Emma, who crossed it perfectly for Destiny to head home. Go. 1-0 to the Lightning. Our section erupted in celebration. Parents jumped from their seats, siblings danced in the aisles, and I felt that surge of pure joy that comes from watching young people achieve something beautiful. The girls embraced in a pile near the corner flag, their faces glowing with happiness and disbelief. But then the call started. 8 minutes into the game, Emma was dribbling through the midfield when a Warriors player clearly stuck out her leg and tripped her. Emma went down hard, the kind of fall that makes every parent in the stands gasp. It was as obvious a foul as you could imagine. Intentional, dangerous, and right in front of the referee. Patterson looked directly at the incident and waved play on. I approached the sideline, staying carefully within the coaching box that I'd learned to respect through years of training and certification courses. "Ref, that was a clear foul," I said, my voice respectful but firm. He barely glanced in my direction. "I know what I saw, coach." 5 minutes later, we had a throw-in near the Warriors' goal. Destiny lined up to take it, and as she raised the ball above her head, a Warriors player grabbed her jersey and pulled her backwards. Again clear as day. Again right in front of Patterson. Again nothing. The pattern continued. Every 50-50 challenge went against us. Every time one of our girls was fouled, it was either ignored or somehow turned into a foul against us. When Aaliyah was shoved in the back during a corner kick, Patterson called her for backing into the player who had clearly initiated the contact. But it wasn't just the missed calls, it was the way Patterson communicated with our team versus theirs. When a Warriors player went down, he jogged over immediately, showing concern and asking if she needed medical attention. When Emma stayed down after a particularly hard tackle, clutching her ankle, he actually walked over and told her to walk it off, without even checking if she was injured. The contrast was stark and impossible to ignore. I'd been coaching long enough to know that referees have different personalities and communication styles, but this felt different. This felt personal. By the 20th minute, the Warriors had equalized through a goal that should never have counted. Their forward was clearly in an offside position when the ball was played, but Patterson's assistant referee kept his flag down. As the Warriors celebrated, I could see the confusion and frustration building on my girls' faces. "Coach Maya," Aaliyah said during a brief stoppage in play, "are we doing something wrong?" The question broke my heart because I could hear the self-doubt creeping into her voice. These girls had spent months building confidence, learning to trust their abilities and believe in themselves. Now I could see that confidence starting to crack under the weight of what felt like systematic unfairness. "You're doing everything right, sweetheart," I told her. "Just keep playing your game." But privately I was starting to worry. Not just about the game but about what this experience was teaching my girls about fairness, about merit, about whether hard work actually matters when the system seems stacked against you. The incident that finally pushed me over the edge came just before halftime. Emma had broken free on the right wing and was racing toward goal when a Warriors defender grabbed her jersey and yanked her to the ground inside the penalty box. It was the kind of foul that every soccer player, coach and fan recognizes immediately, a clear penalty kick. Patterson was no more than 10 yards away. He saw everything. He looked directly at Emma lying on the ground, then at the Warriors defender who was still holding the torn piece of jersey in her hand. He pointed for a goal kick. That's when something inside me snapped. Not anger exactly, but a kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand what you're really dealing with. This wasn't about soccer anymore. This was about something much more fundamental: respect, dignity, and the message we were sending to a group of young women about their worth. "Are you kidding me?" I called out, my voice carrying more frustration than I intended but still within the bounds of what any coach might express in that situation. Patterson's demeanor changed completely. He marched over to the sideline, his face flushed with an anger that seemed disproportionate to what I'd said. Other coaches had been much more vocal throughout the game without drawing any attention from him. "You need to control yourself, coach," he said, his voice loud enough for both sidelines to hear. "I won't tolerate that kind of behavior." The irony wasn't lost on me. In 23 years of playing and coaching soccer, I'd never received a single disciplinary action. I'd been coached on sideline behavior, taken courses on proper communication with officials, and prided myself on maintaining professionalism even in the most frustrating situations. Meanwhile, Morrison had been screaming at his players and questioning calls all game without drawing so much as a warning. But it was more than just the double standard that bothered me. It was the way Patterson looked at me when he delivered his warning, like I was somehow inherently problematic, like my presence on the sideline was itself a threat to the natural order of things. I bit my tongue and nodded, walking back to my position while trying to process what had just happened. Around me I could hear murmurs from our parents in the stands. They'd seen it too. The disparity in treatment, the pattern of calls, the way their daughters were being treated differently than the other team. During halftime, I gathered my girls in our usual circle under the shade of a large oak tree behind the bleachers. Their faces showed a mixture of confusion, frustration, and something else that worried me more, a growing understanding that this was about more than soccer. "Coach Maya," Aaliyah said quietly, "why does it feel like the referee doesn't want us to win?" I looked at these beautiful, intelligent young women and felt my heart break a little. How do you explain to a 13-year-old that sometimes the game isn't fair? How do you tell her that sometimes people will judge her not by her character or her skill, but by assumptions they make before she even steps onto the field? Destiny, always perceptive beyond her years, spoke up next. "It's because we're different from them, isn't it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could lie, try to protect them from a truth they were already beginning to understand. Or I could trust them with honesty, help them process what they were experiencing in a way that would make them stronger rather than bitter. "I don't know for certain what's in anyone's heart," I said carefully. "But I do know this: sometimes people make assumptions about us before they even get to know who we are. Sometimes they decide we don't belong or that we're not good enough before we even get a chance to show them what we're capable of." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "So it doesn't matter how hard we work?" "It matters more than anything," I said firmly. "Because when you work hard, when you play with integrity, when you treat others with respect even when they don't treat you the same way, that's when you discover who you really are. That's when you learn that your worth isn't determined by what other people think of you." I pulled them closer. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What's happening out there says nothing about you and everything about fear. Some people are afraid of your talent, your joy, your refusal to accept limitations. They're afraid because you represent change, and change is scary to people who benefit from things staying the same." Sarah, our youngest, raised her hand like she was in school. "So what do?" "We keep playing," I said simply. "We keep showing them who we are, not with anger or bitterness, but with the beautiful soccer that got us here. We don't let them make us smaller. We don't let them steal our joy. And we definitely don't let them convince us that we don't deserve to be here. The second half began with a renewed energy from our team, but it also brought an escalation in the pattern of biased officiating. It was as if Patterson had decided that our first half performance was too strong, too threatening to the expected outcome. A clear goal from Destiny was called offside when replays later showed she was clearly level with the last defender. A Warriors player literally picked up the ball with her hands to stop a promising attack, and Patterson called it an inadvertent touch. When I asked for clarification on the rule, staying carefully within my coaching box and maintaining a respectful tone, he told me to sit down and be quiet. That phrase hit me like a physical blow. Not because of the words themselves but because of the history they carried, the centuries of women being told to know their place, of black voices being silenced when they dared to speak up for themselves. I thought about my grandmother who'd been told to sit down and be quiet when she tried to register to vote in rural Alabama in 1963. I thought about my mother who'd been told the same thing when she questioned why she was passed over for a promotion despite having better qualifications than her white colleagues. And now here I was, being told to sit down and be quiet for advocating for a group of young girls who deserved better. But this time was different. This time it wasn't just about me. It was about 12 young women who were learning a lesson I desperately didn't want them to learn, that sometimes the world isn't fair and there's nothing you can do about it. The Warriors took the lead on a goal that came directly from a free kick that shouldn't have been awarded. Our defender had clearly won the ball cleanly, but Patterson called it a foul anyway. As the Warriors celebrated, I noticed their coach actually high-fiving some of the parents in the stands, as if they'd accomplished something through their own merit rather than through favorable officiating. With 15 minutes left in the game, we were down 2-1, and I could see my girls starting to believe that maybe they really didn't belong there. These were kids who had overcome so much already: poverty, language barriers, family struggles, schools that didn't believe in them, and now they were learning that sometimes working hard isn't enough. Sometimes the game is rigged before you even step onto the field. Time out. I called, using our last time out of the game. They huddled around me and I could see tears in several of their eyes. Not from physical pain but from the deeper hurt of injustice. The kind of pain that comes from realizing that the world might not be the fair and merit-based place you thought it was. "I'm sorry," Destiny whispered. "I'm trying so hard but nothing we do matters." "Don't you dare apologize," I said firmly, kneeling down to their level so I could look each of them in the eyes. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You've played with more heart, more skill and more sportsmanship than I've ever seen from any team at any level. What's happening out there has nothing to do with your talent or your worth as players or as people." "Then why is it happening?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible above the crowd noise. I looked at these girls, my girls, and made a decision that would change everything. I was done trying to protect them from the harsh realities of the world. They deserved the truth and they deserved to see their coach fight for them. Because sometimes, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, people judge us before we even get a chance to show them who we are. Sometimes they decide we don't belong, that we're not good enough, before we even step onto the field. But you know what? That's their problem, not ours. I stood up and looked toward the stands, where I could see some of our parents checking their phones, probably wondering if they should just pack up and leave early. The Warriors' side was in full celebration mode, already assuming the trophy was theirs. "We have 15 minutes left," I continued. 15 minutes to show everyone in this stadium what we're made of. Not because we need to prove anything to them but because we need to prove it to ourselves. Because when you walk off this field today, I want you to know that you gave everything you had. I want you to know that you played with dignity and grace even when others didn't treat you the same way. As I spoke, I noticed something in the stands that I hadn't seen before. A man in a suit was making his way down from the upper level, stopping to talk to several parents from both sides. He was pointing at the field, taking notes in a small notebook, and his expression was growing more serious by the minute. I didn't recognize him, but something about his purposeful movement and official demeanor suggested he wasn't just a casual observer. "Are you with me?" I asked my girls. The transformation was immediate and powerful. Backs straightened, jaws set, eyes blazed with renewed determination. These weren't just soccer players anymore, they were young women fighting for their dignity, their dreams, their right to be treated fairly. "Let's go show them what lightning looks like," Aaliyah said, and the other girls nodded in agreement, their hands coming together in the center of the circle. The final 15 minutes of that game will be etched in my memory forever. My girls played with a desperation and beauty that took my breath away. They moved the ball with precision and creativity, created chances through pure determination, and defended like their lives depended on it. But Patterson's calls became even more blatant, as if he'd decided that our renewed energy was a threat that needed to be stopped. A clear penalty kick for us when Emma was taken down in the box was ignored completely. A handball by a Warriors defender that prevented a certain goal became a corner kick for them instead of the penalty it should have been. It was as if Patterson knew people were watching and had decided to double down on his bias rather than recalibrate his officiating. That's when I made my decision. I walked to the edge of the coaching box, took a deep breath, and raised my voice so everyone in the stadium could hear me. "This is unacceptable," I shouted, my voice carrying across the field with a clarity and force that surprised even me. "These girls deserve better than this. They deserve to be treated fairly." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Patterson's whistle shrieked as he marched toward me, his face red with an anger that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than just my words. "That's it. You're ejected. Get off my field." As he pointed toward the parking lot, expecting me to leave in shame and silence like so many others probably had before me, something unexpected happened. The man in the suit that I'd noticed earlier walked purposefully onto the field, his credential badge clearly visible as he approached our confrontation. "Actually," he said in a calm but authoritative voice that carried the weight of absolute authority, "I think we need to have a conversation first." Patterson's expression changed from anger to confusion to something that looked unmistakably like fear. His pointing hand dropped to his side and he took a step backward. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm David Chin, president of the Georgia Youth Soccer League," he said, pulling out his identification and holding it up for everyone to see. "And I've been watching this game from the stands for the past hour, documenting what I've witnessed." The entire stadium went silent. Even the Warriors' celebration stopped as parents and players alike turned to watch this unexpected development. You could literally hear the wind rustling through the trees behind the bleachers. "I received several calls from concerned parents about officiating in this game," Chin continued, his voice carrying across the field with the kind of authority that comes from years of leadership experience. "Parents from both teams, actually. I decided to come observe personally, and I have to say, I'm deeply disturbed by what I've witnessed here today." Patterson's face had gone pale, and I could see him struggling to find words. "Sir, I can explain." "No need for explanations right now," Chin interrupted firmly. "I've been recording the last 30 minutes of this game on my phone, and I've documented numerous missed calls, biased officiating patterns and unprofessional conduct toward Coach Johnson that frankly has no place in youth sports at any level." He turned to address both teams and the entire crowd, his voice carrying the gravity of the moment. "This game will be suspended immediately pending a full investigation by the league's officiating committee. Based on what I've witnessed personally, it will likely be replayed in its entirety with neutral officials from outside this region." The Warriors coach, Morrison, approached with the kind of aggressive confidence that suggested he was used to getting his way in situations like this. "Now wait just a minute, we've got a lead here and we've played a clean game. You can't just..." "Mr. Patterson," Chin said, completely ignoring Morrison's protestations, "you're suspended from officiating all league games pending a full review of your conduct today and an investigation into your officiating history. Please leave the field immediately and report to the league office Monday morning at 9 a.m. As Patterson gathered his equipment with shaking hands and walked off the field in complete silence, our section of the stadium erupted in cheers. But these weren't just cheers for a soccer game, they were cheers for justice, for validation, for the acknowledgement that what we'd experienced was real and wrong and would not be tolerated. But Chin wasn't finished. He walked over to where my girls were standing, still in their game formation, looking confused but hopeful, and addressed them directly with a warmth and respect that was the complete opposite of how they'd been treated all day. "Young ladies," he said, his voice gentle but strong, "I want you to know that what happened here today is absolutely not representative of the values of youth soccer or the Georgia Youth Soccer League. You played with grace, skill, intelligence, and sportsmanship in the face of treatment that no young athlete should ever have to endure. That shows more character and class than any trophy or championship ever could." He paused, looking at each of them individually. "You should be proud of yourselves not just for how you played but for how you conducted yourselves when things weren't fair. That's the mark of true champions." Then he turned to me and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen from an official in a long time: genuine respect and recognition. "Coach Johnson, I've heard nothing but excellent things about your program from other coaches and league officials. Your team's reputation for sportsmanship and community involvement is outstanding. The league would be honored to have you serve on our coaching development committee, if you're interested. We need more coaches like you involved in shaping the future of youth soccer in Georgia." The offer caught me completely off guard. After years of feeling like an outsider in youth soccer circles, like someone who had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition, here was the league president publicly acknowledging not just what had happened today, but the work I'd been doing with these girls for years. "I'd be honored," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. Chin nodded and then addressed the crowd one final time. "The replay of this championship game will take place next Saturday at the same time, with neutral officials and additional league oversight. Both teams should be proud of making it this far, and they deserve to compete on a truly level playing field." As he walked off the field, parents from both sides began approaching me. Some were Warriors parents looking embarrassed and apologetic. Others were our parents, crying with relief and gratitude that someone had finally seen what they'd been witnessing and had the power to do something about it. But the moment that will stay with me forever was when Destiny walked up to me, put her small hand in mine and said, "Coach Maya, you didn't let them make us smaller." The week between the suspended game and the replay was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The story had somehow made its way to local media, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk about what had happened at that championship game. But I was careful about how we handled the attention. This wasn't about making ourselves into victims or vilifying anyone, it was about using this moment to create positive change. The investigation into Patterson's officiating history revealed a disturbing pattern. Over the past 3 years, teams from predominantly Black and Hispanic communities had filed 17 complaints about his officiating, compared to 0 complaints from teams in affluent, predominantly white areas. The league had failed to investigate these complaints seriously, typically dismissing them as emotional responses to losing important games. More importantly, the investigation revealed systemic problems with how the league handled bias complaints and trained its officials. Chin used our situation as a catalyst for implementing comprehensive bias training for all officials and creating a formal process for investigating discrimination complaints. Patterson was permanently banned from officiating youth sports in Georgia. Morrison received a 2-game suspension for his role in creating a hostile environment and his inappropriate celebrations of biased calls. But the real transformation happened within our team and community. The replay game took place the following Saturday with officials brought in from Alabama, and the atmosphere was completely different, fair, competitive, and focused on the beautiful game we all loved. We won 3-1, but the victory felt different than it might have the week before. It wasn't just about soccer anymore. It was about proving that when given a fair chance we could compete with anyone. It was about showing that our success wasn't charity or luck. It was earned through talent, hard work, and an unshakable belief in ourselves. Destiny scored the first goal on a beautiful strike from 20 yards out. As she ran toward our sideline with her arms outstretched, I saw something in her face that hadn't been there before. A confidence that came not just from scoring a goal, but from knowing that she belonged on that field and that no one could take that away from her. Emma added the second goal with a header from a corner kick, and Aaliyah sealed the victory with a goal in the final minutes that showcased everything beautiful about the game: teamwork, creativity, and pure joy. When the final whistle blew, our girls didn't just celebrate winning a championship. They celebrated proving that they deserved to be there. The trophy presentation was emotional in ways I hadn't expected. When Chen handed me the championship trophy, he also announced the creation of the Maya Johnson Sportsmanship Award, which would be given annually to a coach who exemplified integrity and advocacy for their players in the face of adversity. "This award represents the values we want to see in youth sports," he said to the crowd. "Coaches who stand up for what's right, who protect their players, and who understand that winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about building character and fighting for fairness." The celebration continued long after we left the stadium. Our community organized a victory party at the local community center, where families from throughout East Atlanta came to celebrate not just our championship, but what it represented. Mrs. Johnson, Destiny's grandmother, told me it was the first time in her 83 years that she'd seen a young Black woman stand up to authority and be validated rather than punished. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came 3 weeks later, when I received a letter from Sarah, our youngest player. "Dear Coach Maya, I wanted to thank you for teaching us that we don't have to accept unfairness just because someone in authority tells us to. My mom says you showed us how to fight for ourselves with dignity. I've been thinking about becoming a lawyer because of what happened so I can help other people when they're treated unfairly. Thank you for showing me that my voice matters." The months following our championship victory brought changes I never could have anticipated. The coaching development committee position that Chen had offered me became a platform for implementing real systemic change in youth soccer throughout Georgia. I worked with other coaches, parents, and officials to develop new training programs focused on recognizing and addressing bias in youth sports. One of our first initiatives was creating a mentorship program pairing experienced coaches from diverse backgrounds with new officials. The goal was to help referees understand the communities they were serving and to recognize how their unconscious biases might affect their officiating. Patterson's case had shown us that bias training couldn't just be a one-time workshop. It had to be an ongoing process of education and accountability. We also established a formal complaint process that took bias allegations seriously. Instead of dismissing concerns as emotional responses, the league created an investigation protocol that included multiple perspectives and objective analysis of game footage when available. Most importantly, we created a system where coaches and parents felt safe reporting discriminatory treatment without fear of retaliation. The Lightning continued to thrive as both a soccer program and a community institution. Destiny earned a full scholarship to play Division I soccer at Clemson University, where she's studying sports management with the goal of working in professional soccer administration. She frequently returns to volunteer with our program, helping the next generation of young women understand their worth and potential. Aaliyah became a certified referee herself at 16, determined to ensure that other young players never experienced what our team went through. She's already officiated over 50 games and has become known for her fair, professional approach and her ability to communicate effectively with players from all backgrounds. Her goal is to become the first Black woman to referee a World Cup final. Emma's family opened Galazzo Cafe, a small restaurant near our practice facility that became a gathering place for our soccer community. Families of all backgrounds share meals and stories there, and the walls are covered with photos from our championship season and the teams that followed. Emma earned a scholarship to Georgia Tech, where she's studying engineering while continuing to play soccer. Sarah, true to her word in that letter, is already taking advanced courses in government and law at just 16. She plans to attend law school and specialize in civil rights law, inspired by watching how legal and institutional changes could address systemic unfairness. The ripple effects extended far beyond our immediate community. Other youth sports leagues across Georgia adopted similar bias training and complaint procedures after hearing about our experience. I began speaking at coaching clinics and youth sports conferences throughout the Southeast, sharing our story and helping other communities recognize and address discrimination in their own programs. 3 years after that championship game, I was invited to speak at the National Youth Soccer Convention in Chicago. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of coaches, officials, and administrators from across the country, I thought about that day when Patterson tried to silence me, when he told me to sit down and be quiet. The most important lesson from our experience, I told the audience, isn't that discrimination exists in youth sports. Unfortunately, many of us already knew that. The most important lesson is that change is possible when we refuse to accept injustice as normal, when we stand up for our athletes, and when institutions are willing to examine themselves honestly and make necessary changes. I talked about the dozens of young women who had come through our program since that championship season, and how the culture of advocacy and self-worth we'd built continued to empower new generations of athletes. I talked about the other coaches who had contacted me from around the country, sharing their own stories of discrimination and asking for advice on how to address it effectively. But most importantly, I talked about the responsibility we all have to create environments where every young person can develop their potential without facing barriers based on who they are or where they come from. When we fail to address bias and discrimination in youth sports, I concluded, we're not just affecting games and trophies. We're teaching young people lessons about their worth, their place in society, and whether hard work actually matters. We're either building them up or tearing them down. The choice is ours. The standing ovation that followed lasted several minutes, but more meaningful were the conversations that happened afterward. Coaches from rural communities, urban programs, and suburban leagues shared their own experiences and committed to implementing change in their own contexts. 6 months later, I received a letter from a coach in Oregon whose team had faced similar discrimination. She had used our story and the protocols we developed to successfully address bias in her local league. A coach from Texas sent photos of his team's championship celebration, explaining how our example had given him the courage to advocate for his players when they faced unfair treatment. The Maya Johnson Sportsmanship Award has now been given to 12 coaches across Georgia, each of whom has demonstrated exceptional advocacy for their players in the face of adversity. The award comes with a $2,000 grant for their program and recognition at the state championship games, but more importantly, it creates a network of coaches committed to equity and fairness in youth sports. As I write this, 7 years have passed since that championship game, and the Lightning program has become something I never imagined when I started coaching. We now serve over 200 young women across 4 age groups, with a waiting list that stretches into the hundreds. But more than the numbers, it's the culture we've built that makes me proud. Every new player learns not just soccer skills, but lessons about advocacy, dignity, and the power of collective action. We study the history of athletes who fought for social justice, from Muhammad Ali to Megan Rapinoe. We discuss current events and how they relate to fairness and equality in sports and society. Most importantly, we create an environment where young women feel empowered to speak up when they witness injustice. Our program has produced 12 Division I college players, 3 professional athletes, 2 coaches, 1 sports journalist, and countless young women who carry the confidence and advocacy skills they learned on our soccer fields into their careers and communities. But the statistics I'm most proud of are different. 95% of our players graduate high school, 87% attend college, and 100% report that the program helped them develop the confidence to stand up for themselves and others. The systemic changes in Georgia youth soccer have been equally significant. Bias complaints have decreased by 78% since new training and accountability measures were implemented, not because discrimination has disappeared, but because officials are better trained and because discriminatory referees have been identified and removed from youth games. The Georgia Youth Soccer League now requires annual bias training for all officials, with additional training required for those officiating in diverse communities. The complaint process we helped design has been adopted by youth soccer leagues in 12 other states, creating a model for addressing discrimination in youth sports nationwide. I've been asked many times whether I regret speaking up that day, whether the stress and controversy were worth it. The answer is always the same. I think about Destiny, confident and strong at Clemson. I think about Aaliyah, officiating games with fairness and integrity. I think about Emma, building bridges in our community through her family's restaurant. I think about Sarah, preparing to fight for justice through the law. But I also think about the hundreds of other young women who have benefited from the changes we fought for, girls whose names I'll never know, who play for coaches I've never met, who will never face the kind of discrimination we experienced because enough people stood up and said it was unacceptable. The Lightning program continues to grow and evolve. We've added leadership development workshops, community service projects, and partnerships with local organizations focused on social justice. Our players don't just learn to play soccer. They learn to be citizens, advocates, and leaders in their communities. Last month, I received the most meaningful recognition of my career, an invitation to join the board of directors for the U.S. Youth Soccer Association, where I'll help develop national policies for addressing discrimination and promoting equity in youth sports. It's a position that would have been unimaginable 7 years ago, when I was just a coach trying to protect her players from biased officiating. The invitation letter noted that my courageous advocacy and proven leadership in promoting equity and fairness in youth sports made me an ideal candidate to help shape national policy. Reading those words, I thought about that moment when Patterson told me to sit down and be quiet, and I smiled. Not because of the recognition, but because of what it represents: the transformation of anger and frustration into systemic change, the conversion of a painful experience into a platform for helping others, and the proof that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, can create ripples that extend far beyond what we initially imagine. Looking back on that championship game 7 years ago, I realize it was about so much more than soccer. It was about teaching young women that they don't have to accept injustice silently. It was about showing them that their voices matter, that their experiences are valid, and that they have the power to create change when they stand together. The referee tried to diminish us that day, to make us feel like we didn't belong on that field. But what he didn't understand is that we belonged there not because anyone gave us permission, but because we had earned it through hard work, dedication, and an unshakable belief in ourselves and each other. Those girls taught me something profound that day. They taught me that sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger or bitterness, but grace under pressure combined with unwavering determination to fight for what's right. They showed me that dignity isn't something that can be taken away, it's something you carry within yourself, regardless of how others treat you. The most important lesson from our experience isn't about soccer or even about discrimination specifically. It's about the responsibility we all have to stand up for fairness, to protect those who are vulnerable, and to use whatever privilege or platform we have to create positive change. When I spoke up that day, I wasn't thinking about systemic change or national recognition or inspiring other coaches. I was thinking about 12 young women who deserved to be treated fairly, who had worked too hard to have their dreams crushed by someone else's bias. But that's how real change happens, not through grand gestures or perfect plans, but through ordinary people deciding that they won't accept injustice as normal, that they'll risk discomfort and controversy to protect what they believe in. To anyone who has ever felt like the game was rigged against them, remember this: Your worth isn't determined by the scoreboard or the referee's calls or anyone else's opinion of where you belong. Your value comes from the strength of your character, the depth of your resilience, and the courage to keep playing even when the odds seem impossible. To coaches, parents, and community leaders who witness discrimination, your silence is a choice. When you fail to speak up, you're not staying neutral, you're supporting the status quo. You're telling young people that their dignity is less important than your comfort, that their dreams matter less than avoiding conflict. To young athletes who face unfair treatment, you are not powerless. Your voice matters. Your experiences are valid. You deserve to compete on a level playing field, to be treated with respect, and to have advocates who will fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. The referee tried to silence us that day, but instead he helped us find our voices. He thought he was teaching us our place, but instead he taught us to claim our space. He believed he was showing us we didn't belong, but instead he helped us understand that we belong anywhere we choose to be, anywhere we're willing to fight to stay. That's the real victory, not just winning the game but refusing to let anyone else define who you are or what you're capable of achieving. It's understanding that the most important referee in your life is the one looking back at you in the mirror, and she knows your true worth. The championship trophy sits in our community center, where it serves as a reminder not just of that season's success, but of what's possible when people refuse to accept injustice as normal. Next to it is a photo from our championship celebration. 12 young women with their arms around each other, their faces glowing with joy and pride and the unshakable knowledge that they belong exactly where they are. Every time a new group of girls joins our program, I tell them this story. Not to scare them or to make them cynical about the world, but to help them understand their power, their worth, and their responsibility to each other and to the girls who will come after them. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is really about, not the individual victories or recognition, but the collective progress we make when we refuse to let discrimination go unchallenged, when we stand up for each other, and when we use our experiences, both painful and triumphant, to create a better world for the next generation. The game continues and we're still playing to win. Not just for ourselves but for everyone who comes after us, everyone who deserves a fair chance to chase their dreams and show the world what they're capable of achieving. That's our legacy, our responsibility, and our greatest victory of all.